At the beginning of the 70s, it must be admitted, if Renault is successful with its popular 4 and 5, it's a bit of a disaster at the top of the range. The Rambler was quickly buried in 1967 after only 4,000 units produced, while the Renault 16, launched in 1965, tries to maintain a semblance of presence in the niche. Meanwhile, Citroën was topping the charts with its DS since 1955 and launched the 110 in 1974. Peugeot was catching up with an interesting 504 unveiled in 1968 before launching its 604 in 1975. For Renault, it's time to catch up and react fairly quickly. Well, let's talk about the top of the French automotive range now. Quite a story. The fault lies in the post-war political decision to favor the production of small vehicles in order to motorize the whole of France and thus restart the machine through volume. So, of course, there will be attempts at high-end vehicles like Facel Vega, with excellence in particular, but which will pay a heavy price for its American engines. Or Monaco with the 560, which was, in my opinion, the most beautiful French sedan ever produced. In fact, we've already made a little video about it. In short, in the 60s, the French high-end is looking for itself. While Citroën thinks it has found the winning formula by buying Maserati and its 5.6s Peugeot and Renault, on the other hand, team up to produce 5.6s and 5.8s in order to fight on equal terms against the Germans who are becoming the champions of the high-end at that time. The alliance of the two manufacturers, Peugeot and Renault, will therefore provoke in them the need to simply develop models that will receive these 5.6 and 5.8 engines. Peugeot is working on the 604, while Renault is developing the future Renault 30. At Peugeot, they remain very traditional, and the 604 will be a large sedan, 3 volumes, statutory, rear-wheel drive. And at Renault, they are going to play the card of originality, pushing the logic of the Renault 16 to its extreme, with a large, ragged sedan, declined in R20 in 1976 for the entry level with 4 cylinders, and R30 in 1975 for the high-end, which will receive the largest engines. And as one was telling you, originally, 5.8s were planned for the Peugeot 604 and for the Renault 30. Except that the oil crisis of 1973 is going to change things a little bit. Peugeot and Renault will have to revise their plan, reduce costs, partner with 5 Volvo, and abandon the idea of a 5.8 to focus only on a 5.6. The famous 5.6 Peugeot, Renault, 5 Volvo Peugeot, Renault, 5 Volvo for Peugeot, Renault, 5 Volvo. But the problem, besides the reliability at the beginning, because after the 5.6 Peugeot, Renault, 5 Volvo became reliable anyway. Yes, a little. Other problems also of unstable idle. Well, it was still a hell, but it had especially a big problem. It was its efficiency. The Renault 30 with its 2.7-liter engine produced only 131 horsepower. Well, in 1978, the R30TX fortunately saw its power increase to 142 horsepower, but despite its 6 cylinders, the R30 remains far too short of German standards. Its particular design, we owe it to Gaston Juchet, who also designed the Renault 16. And it's not ugly, but if the French were starting to get used to this type of design, it won't be the case for export, where at this level of range, 3-volume bodies are preferred. Well, except for the 604, which will be a failure. But at Renault, the decision to offer a more affordable and less greedy Renault 20 will help to forget the relative failure of the R30. Presented in November 1975, the R20 will sell exactly 607,405 copies until 1984, amortizing the development costs of the Renault 30. And the only difference between the Renault 30 and the Renault 20? Well, it's simply the headlights, and they are rectangular on the Renault 20. There will also be the difference in the engine. The Renault 30 will have a 5.6, but it will not manage to stand out, and if the design of the Renault 30 could surprise at this level of range, and if the Renault 20 blurred its image a little bit, the real problem of the Renault 30 was simply its performances. And one example illustrates this problem well, that of the unique Renault 30 of the Rapid Intervention Brigade of the National Gendarmerie. Indeed, as early as 1976, the Ministry of Defense is interested in the Renault 30 equipped with a 5.6, and therefore potentially able to join the Brigade of Research and Intervention. A model will therefore be ordered from Renault for testing, but will not convince. And finally, the Gendarmerie will opt for the more efficient CX 2400, despite 2 fewer cylinders, and especially much less greedy. The Renault 30 of the Brigade of Research and Intervention will therefore only remain in service for 6 months at the Namur Brigade on the A6 highway. Between 2 low performances, 2 high consumption, and despite rather rich equipment, the R30 will not convince many people. There were still 136,403 copies that found takers until 1983, so a relative failure. Because released the same year but sold 2 more years, the 604 will not do much better with about 150,000 copies. And this double French failure, even triple if we add the Talbot Agora, will seal the fate of the French high-end. So for the R30, fortunately the R20 was able to save a little bit of the furniture, but it wasn't a sure thing from the start. Because next to the Renault 20 released in 1976, the R16 will continue its career, just like the R12, and this problem of model stacking will worsen with the R18 released in 1978. Admit that at the time, at Renault, it wasn't very clear. At the beginning of its career, the R20 is equipped with the Cleon Alu 1, 0.6 liters of 96 horses, but not powerful enough given the weight of the car. In 1977, it will therefore receive the Duvrin 2.0L engine of 110 horses, but which it will share with its competitors 110. And in 1979, it will receive the diesel evolution of the Duvrin with 2.1 liters and 63.5 horses. Yes, with the 63 horses, the half, it counts. The 1981 TX comes with a 2.11 quarts 115 HP Duvrin engine. And there, it starts to get interesting. There was also a turbo diesel version of 83 horses that it shared with the R30. And it will eventually disappear in 1983 at the same time as the R30. And they will both be replaced by a single car, the R25. And finally, Renault will have a consistent range. So today, one might ask, what's the point of a 30 or a 20? Well, perhaps a historical interest first, because they are the symbol of an era. Their stylistic originality is also a major asset, as is the level of equipment, at least on the Renault 30. Which do you prefer, the Renault 30 or the Renault 20? Let me know in the comments. Want to have a second question for you? Am one the only one who thinks that the dashboard of the Renault 30 looks a lot like the dashboard of the latest Megane E-Tech? Tell me if I'm crazy, if there really is a great resemblance between the two. Thank you, of course, for being so many and for completely blowing up last week's video about the Peugeot 305. One expected it to work well, but frankly not to that extent. So a big thank you. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, and share. And of course, we'll see you very soon in the next video. Thank you all. Bye.